Have you ever stood at the edge of a nation and realized that a border is more than just a line on a map? Some places exist quietly, far from the world's spotlight. They are rarely featured in travel magazines, seldom become international headlines, and are often overlooked by those who know only the famous destinations of Indonesia. Yet these places hold stories so extraordinary that they redefine what it truly means to belong to a nation. On the eastern frontier of Indonesia lies a land where history is not confined to books. It is spoken through ancient traditions, echoed across rugged mountains, carried by generations of storytellers, and preserved in the hearts of people whose ancestors have guarded this land for centuries. This is Belu, a regency that does not simply exist on Indonesia's map. It stands as one of the nation's most important gateways, where Indonesia meets the Democratic Republic of Timor Leste, where cultures intertwine instead of collide, and where the spirit of friendship has become the foundation of an entire civilization. The very name Belu carries a remarkable meaning. It means friend. Imagine that for a moment. Long before modern governments, political borders, passports, and immigration checkpoints existed, the people of this land chose to define their identity with a single word that celebrated friendship, trust, and human connection. It was more than a name, it became a philosophy passed from one generation to the next. Today, Belu covers approximately 1,285 square kilometers and is home to more than 231,000 people. Its administrative center is the vibrant border city of Atambua, a place where different cultures, languages, traditions, and histories come together every single day. The regency consists of 12 districts, 12 urban villages, and 69 rural villages, including dozens of communities located directly along Indonesia's international border. For many Indonesians, Belu is not simply another administrative region. It is the nation's front porch, where every sunrise reminds its people that they live at the very edge of the republic while proudly protecting its sovereignty. Geographically, Belu occupies one of the most strategic locations on Timor Island. To the north, the Ombai Strait connects these shores to the vast seas of eastern Indonesia. To the south lies Malacca Regency. To the east stands the sovereign nation of Timor Leste. To the west stretches north-central Timor Regency. These boundaries have shaped Belu's destiny for centuries. Traders, travelers, explorers, missionaries, warriors, and families have crossed these lands for generations, creating a unique cultural landscape unlike anywhere else in Indonesia. But Belu's significance reaches far beyond geography. In recent years, the Regency has gained recognition for something that reflects the values of its people. It has been acknowledged as one of the strongest performers in anti-corruption efforts within East Nusa Tenggara province, demonstrating that integrity is not merely an ideal, but a commitment embraced by local governance and society. This achievement represents more than administrative success. It reflects a community determined to build a future based on honesty, accountability, and public trust. Yet statistics and achievements tell only a fraction of Belu's remarkable story. To truly understand this land, we must journey far beyond modern history, far beyond written records, far beyond the arrival of European ships, far beyond the formation of kingdoms. We must travel into a time when the people of Belu believed the world itself was still being born. A time when, according to ancient oral traditions preserved by respected customary speakers known as the Makoan, the entire island of Timor lay hidden beneath endless waters. There were no valleys, no forests, no villages, no roads, no kingdoms, only an infinite sea stretching beyond the horizon. Then something extraordinary happened. From the depths of those ancient waters, a tiny point of land emerged. At first, it was said to be no larger than the eye of a chicken. Then it grew to the size of a sliced betel nut, then as large as a handful of rice, then finally to the size of a coin. That glowing point would one day become Mount Lakaan, the highest mountain in Belu. To outsiders, it is simply another mountain. To the people of Belu, it is something infinitely greater. It is the sacred birthplace of memory, identity, and life itself. Because, according to one of the most treasured traditions of Belu, humanity on this land began not in a kingdom, not in a palace, but upon the summit of this sacred mountain. And from that breathtaking legend begins one of the most fascinating origin stories in all of Indonesia. From the highest peak of Mount Lakaan, where clouds embrace the earth and the wind carries whispers older than history itself, the people of Belu believe that the story of their ancestors truly began. This is not merely a legend passed down to entertain children. For generations, it has served as a living memory, carefully preserved through oral tradition by elders whose voices became libraries long before books ever reached these mountains. According to Belu tradition, when the world was still young and nearly all of Timor remained submerged beneath water, only the summit of Mount Lakaan stood above the endless sea. It was there that a mysterious princess descended from the heavens. Her name was Laka Loro Kemesak. In the Belu language, her name is often understood to mean the lone princess without earthly origin. She was described as breathtakingly beautiful, wise beyond human understanding, and blessed with extraordinary supernatural power. Unlike ordinary people, her story could not be explained through human logic. The elders say she arrived without parents, without a kingdom, without a family, without anyone who could claim to know where she came from. She simply appeared upon the sacred mountain, becoming the first guardian of what would one day become the homeland of the Belu people. Even more remarkable is the mystery surrounding the father of her children. Traditional storytellers explain that no one ever knew his true identity. He was never described as an ordinary man. Instead, he became known through honorific titles rather than a personal name. Among the most respected was Manu Ama Lakaan Nain, the Lord of Lakaan, a sacred ancestral figure whose presence remained hidden from human eyes. Because his identity was never revealed, Laka Loro Kemesak herself became known by another title, Nain Bilak An, meaning one who exists through her own divine power. These stories are not presented as historical documents in the modern academic sense. Rather, they represent the spiritual worldview through which generations of Belu people understood their origins, their identity, and their connection to the land they inherited. Over time, Laka Loro Kemesak gave birth to 4 children, 2 sons, Atok Lakaan and Tek Lakaan. She also bore 2 daughters, Elok Lower Lorok and Balok Lower Lorok. According to tradition, as they reached adulthood, there were no other human communities upon the mountain. To ensure the continuation of humanity, the siblings formed the first families of Belu. From these unions, countless descendants were believed to spread across Timor and beyond, reaching areas that today include Timor Leste, the lands of the Dawan people, Rote Island, Sabu Island, and even the eastern regions of Flores. Whether viewed as sacred mythology or cultural heritage, the story reveals something profound about how the people of Belu perceive themselves. Their identity was never built solely upon power or conquest. It was built upon ancestry, upon family, upon continuity, upon an unbroken connection between the living, their ancestors, and the land beneath their feet. Perhaps one of the most fascinating cultural legacies linked to this origin story is Belu's long-standing respect for women. Many traditional scholars believe that the legend of Laka Loro Kmesak reflects the early influence of matrilineal traditions, where women occupied a central and highly respected place within society. Even as later generations gradually adopted patrilineal customs through marriage alliances and evolving political structures, the honor given to women remained deeply embedded within Belu culture. Marriage itself was never viewed as a simple transaction. Instead, it represented a profound expression of respect. When a woman joined her husband's clan, the process symbolized not ownership, but the recognition of her immeasurable value. Families willingly sacrificed wealth and resources because welcoming a woman into their lineage was considered an extraordinary privilege rather than an entitlement. This philosophy reveals a society whose deepest values were rooted in dignity, mutual respect, and kinship. These beliefs shaped not only family life, but also the political and cultural foundations that would influence Belu for centuries. Yet the story does not end atop Mount Lakaan. Beyond these sacred legends, another remarkable tradition survives across the islands of eastern Indonesia. It tells of ancient voyages across dangerous seas, of brothers separated by fate, and of an oath of unity so powerful that its message continues to resonate hundreds of years later. It is a story that stretches far beyond Belu itself, connecting distant islands through memory rather than maps, and proving that long before modern borders divided nations, the people of this region already understood something the world still struggles to learn: that family can exist across oceans. That identity can transcend geography, and that true brotherhood is stronger than any border ever drawn by human hands. As the generations of Mount Lakaan multiplied, another story began to emerge from across the sea. Unlike legends carved into stone, this history survived through something even more fragile and extraordinary: human memory. For centuries, the elders of Sabu and neighbouring islands preserved long genealogies without writing them down. They did not rely on books, manuscripts, or monuments. Instead, every generation entrusted these stories to carefully chosen custodians who memorized the names of their ancestors with astonishing precision and passed them to the next generation word for word. This living tradition, known today as oral history, became one of the greatest guardians of cultural identity in eastern Indonesia. Among its most treasured accounts is the story of three brothers, Belu Mau, Timau, and Hawu Mau. According to the oral traditions of the Sabu people, these three men shared the same father and belonged to a lineage that stretched back through many generations to an ancestor remembered as Kika Ga. Their family tree was carefully preserved across centuries, demonstrating just how deeply the people valued ancestry and the continuity of memory. The story tells of a time when the three brothers left their homeland on Sabu Island in search of new opportunities beyond the horizon. They sailed eastward across unpredictable seas, guided only by courage, instinct, and hope. Their journey eventually brought them to the vast island of Timor. Before settling, they are said to have raised a stone monument near what is now the Betun area. There they made a solemn promise, a promise that would echo through countless generations. If their descendants should ever meet in the future, they must never fight one another, no matter where they lived, no matter what language they spoke, no matter how different their customs became. They were to remember that they shared the same blood. They were family. This ancient oath is one of the most powerful themes found within the oral traditions of the region. It reflects a worldview in which kinship extended far beyond villages and kingdoms. Relationships were measured not by political boundaries, but by shared ancestry and mutual responsibility. According to the tradition, Belu Mau and his followers eventually established themselves in the highlands surrounding Mount Lakaan. Their houses were said to resemble overturned boats, a design still recognized in parts of eastern Indonesia and believed to symbolize the great sea voyages that brought their ancestors to new lands. As generations passed, Belu Mau's descendants gradually blended with the communities already living around Mount Lakaan. Their customs evolved, their traditions merged, their identity became inseparable from the land that would eventually be known as Belu. Meanwhile, the journeys of the other brothers took dramatically different paths. After leaving Timor, Mau and Hawu Mau attempted to return home by sea. Nature had other plans. A violent storm struck their vessel. The waves scattered their hopes across the ocean. Their boat crashed along the rocky shores of what is now North Amphoang, near Kupang. While repairing the damaged vessel, Mau climbed into the mountains searching for timber. The place where he stopped is believed by local tradition to have given its name to Mount Timau, one of the highest peaks in West Timor. Hawu Mau remained nearby for a time before setting sail alone. Unlike his brothers, he successfully reached Sabu Island once again, carrying home the memories of their remarkable journey. Mau, however, faced another disaster. A second storm drove his vessel away from its intended course until it finally drifted toward Rote Island. Unable to continue, his followers settled there, becoming part of the island's growing communities. Though separated by distance, storms, and time, the descendants of Belu Mau, Mau, and Hawu Mau continue to remember the ancient promise made by their ancestors. The story remains one of the most enduring symbols of unity across the islands of eastern Indonesia. Modern historians distinguish these oral traditions from evidence established through archaeology and written documentation. While such accounts cannot always be verified in the same way as recorded historical events, they remain invaluable cultural heritage. They preserve how communities understood their origins, their relationships with neighboring peoples, and the values they chose to pass from one generation to the next. In Belu, history is not defined only by dates. It is carried in songs, in ceremonies, in family names, in sacred mountains, and in promises that refuse to disappear, even after hundreds of years. As fascinating as these ancestral stories are, they are only one part of Belu's remarkable past. Alongside oral tradition, researchers have uncovered evidence of ancient peoples, migrating communities, and powerful kingdoms that would transform Belu into one of the most influential regions on the island of Timor. The next chapter moves beyond legend and into the world of historical research, where archaeology, anthropology, and local tradition begin to intersect, revealing a civilization far older and far more complex than most people have ever imagined. As oral traditions continue to preserve the spiritual memory of Belu's origins, scholars and researchers began searching for another kind of evidence. Instead of relying on legends, they turned to archaeology, anthropology, linguistics, and the collective knowledge of local communities. Their discoveries did not erase the ancient stories. Rather, they added new layers to Belu's remarkable history. According to many researchers, some of the earliest inhabitants of the Belu region were a people remembered as the Melus. In local tradition, they are often called Ema Fatuk Oan, Ema I Oan, a phrase commonly understood to mean the people of stone and wood. The description paints a picture of a hardy community that lived in close harmony with the natural world. They were believed to be physically strong, compact in stature, and remarkably resilient. Long before organized kingdoms emerged, these early inhabitants adapted to the demanding landscapes of Timor, where rugged mountains, dense forests, and seasonal droughts tested every generation. Although many details about the Melus remain subjects of scholarly debate, they continue to occupy an important place in Belu's historical identity. Over time, new groups began arriving from beyond Timor. Many traditional accounts refer to these newcomers as originating from Sina Mutin Malaka. The exact meaning of this phrase has been interpreted in different ways by historians and local scholars. Some associate it with ancient migration routes connected to the Malay Peninsula, while others believe it reflects broader maritime networks that linked Southeast Asia through trade, culture, and human movement over many centuries. Regardless of the precise interpretation, one idea appears consistently across many local traditions. Belu was never isolated. It was connected to a much larger world. Long before modern shipping lanes and international airports, the seas surrounding Timor served as highways rather than barriers. Merchants crossed them, families crossed them, religious traditions crossed them, ideas crossed them. Civilizations met not through conquest alone, but through exchange. Several versions of local history describe the arrival of three influential brothers from Malacca. Although different customary communities preserve different names, the central narrative remains remarkably similar. These leaders established close relationships with local societies while introducing new political structures and expanding regional trade. Among some customary traditions, they are remembered as Nekin Mataus, Suku Mataus, and Bara Mataus. Other communities preserve the names Loro Sanko, Loro Banleo, and Loro Sonbai. Still others identify them as Wehali Nain, Wewiku Nain, and Haitimuk Nain. The differences illustrate something important about oral history. It is not a single story frozen in time. It is a living tradition that reflects the perspectives of different communities while preserving the same underlying memory. Despite variations in names, these figures are consistently portrayed as respected rulers who governed defined territories and maintained close alliances with the people under their leadership. Their arrival was associated not only with commerce, but also with diplomacy, cultural exchange, and religious relationships. Among the most valuable resources sought during this era was sandalwood. For centuries, Timor's fragrant sandalwood ranked among the most prized commodities in Asia. Its exceptional quality attracted traders from across the region, connecting Timor to vast commercial networks that stretched across the Indonesian archipelago and beyond. Belu occupied an important position within these exchanges, yet local tradition emphasizes that while newcomers contributed to Belu's development, the original custodians of the northern Belu region remained the descendants of Manu Ama Lakaan, whose sacred connection to Mount Lakaan continued to define the spiritual heart of the land. Rather than portraying history as a struggle between conquerors and the conquered, many Belu traditions describe a gradual process of coexistence. Communities intermarried, customs blended, political alliances formed. Different peoples became one society while preserving memories of their diverse origins. This cultural fusion would eventually shape the powerful traditional kingdoms that emerged across the region. However, history also reveals another important truth. The political boundaries familiar today did not always exist. According to many local historians, the division between northern and southern Belu was not originally created by indigenous rulers. Instead, it developed much later as part of colonial administrative strategies designed to simplify governance and strengthen foreign control over the region. For the people themselves, Belu had always been understood as a shared cultural homeland. Its identity was rooted less in borders than in relationships, less in territory than in kinship, less in political authority than in shared ancestry. These traditions remind us that history is rarely simple. Civilizations are not built in a single generation. They grow through countless encounters between different peoples, different beliefs, and different ways of seeing the world. Belu became what it is today not because one culture replaced another, but because generations learned to adapt, cooperate, and create something entirely their own. As these communities expanded, powerful traditional kingdoms began to rise across the land. They established systems of leadership, diplomacy, customary law, and regional alliances that would shape Belu for centuries. Soon, this frontier society would enter a new era, one marked by royal courts, expanding influence, international trade, and eventually the arrival of European colonial powers that would forever alter the course of its history. As Belu's communities became larger and more interconnected, leadership evolved beyond family lineages into organized traditional kingdoms. These were not kingdoms built merely upon military strength. Their authority rested on customary law, sacred obligations, ancestral legitimacy, and the trust of the people they governed. Every ruler was expected not only to lead, but also to preserve harmony between humanity, nature, and the spiritual world. This balance formed the foundation of governance across much of Timor for generations. Among the most influential political centres was the Kingdom of Wawiku-Wehali. For centuries, it exercised enormous cultural and political influence over much of southern Belu and neighbouring regions. Its rulers were respected not simply as political leaders, but as custodians of tradition, diplomacy, and customary law. In northern Belu, another powerful centre of authority emerged. The Kingdom of Fialaran became one of the principal guardians of the Northern Territories. According to local historical traditions, it was led by Dasi Mau Bauk, whose administration worked alongside a network of respected local leaders responsible for different communities across the region. These leaders represented more than government officials. They embodied the living connection between ancestral customs and everyday life. Among them were figures remembered through generations such as Loro Bauho, Lakikun, Naitimu, Mandeu, Asumanu, Dualilu, Takirin, Lasiolat, and Lidak. Other influential names, including Dafala, Manletan, Umaklaran, Sorbau, Selawan, and several additional customary leaders, continued to shape the political landscape of Belu. Although modern readers may see only a long list of unfamiliar names, each represented an important community with its own traditions, responsibilities, and identity. Together, they formed a network of alliances that maintained stability across the region long before modern administrative systems existed. Marriage also became an essential instrument of diplomacy. One of the most significant traditional accounts describes the marriage between Loro Bauho and Klusin, remembered under the name As Tanara. Their union symbolized far more than a personal relationship. It strengthened alliances among multiple customary territories and reinforced political unity during an era when family ties often determined peace more effectively than military force. As generations passed, Belu developed an increasingly sophisticated social structure. Communities were connected through what local traditions describe as the four interwoven bonds. These relationships linked families, clans, neighbouring territories, and traditional authorities into a system based upon cooperation rather than constant conflict. The result was a society capable of managing diversity without losing its cultural identity. This period is sometimes remembered by local historians as part of the golden age of the traditional kingdoms. Trade expanded, agriculture flourished, ceremonies became increasingly elaborate, customary law guided daily life, and despite occasional rivalries among neighbouring rulers, shared ancestry and mutual respect often prevented disputes from escalating into prolonged warfare. Yet Belu's strategic location would eventually attract attention from forces far beyond Timor. Its valuable sandalwood forests had already become famous throughout Asia. European merchants soon recognized the island's economic importance. What began as commercial interest gradually transformed into political ambition. By the 19th century, Dutch colonial influence was steadily expanding across the Indonesian archipelago. Belu, positioned along important maritime routes and bordering territories claimed by Portugal on the eastern half of Timor, became an increasingly significant frontier. colonial administrators viewed the region differently from its indigenous inhabitants. Where local communities saw ancestral lands connected through kinship and tradition, colonial governments saw districts to be measured, categorized, taxed, and controlled. Administrative boundaries replaced customary landscapes. Ancient alliances were reorganized according to foreign political objectives. Beginning in the 19th century, Dutch authorities gradually consolidated numerous traditional kingdoms into larger administrative units. At one point, the broader Belu region included around 20 self-governing kingdoms or swapraja, stretching across areas that today belong to both Belu and north-central Timor. These kingdoms included Wehali, Wewiku, Haitimuk, Fatuaruin, Lakikun, Dirma, Mandu, Insana, Biboki, Harneno, Naitimu, Lidak, Jenilu, Fialaran, Silawan, Maukata, Lamaknen, Makir, and Lamaksanulu. Each possessed its own rulers, customary institutions, and local traditions. Rather than abolishing these kingdoms immediately, Dutch administrators often governed indirectly. They relied upon local rulers while gradually reshaping the political landscape to serve colonial interests. Kingdoms were merged, others were divided. Administrative centers were relocated. Traditional authority increasingly became subject to colonial supervision. In 1862, the Dutch established Atapupu as the administrative center of the region. Its excellent natural harbor made it one of the most important ports on Timor's northern coast. Ships carrying officials, merchants, missionaries, and goods connected Belu to wider colonial trade networks across the Dutch East Indies. But colonial administration was never static. As political priorities changed, so did the maps. Kingdoms were repeatedly reorganized throughout the early 20th century. Some disappeared altogether, others were combined into newly created administrative entities. In 1916, another pivotal decision was made. The Dutch transferred the administrative capital from the coastal port of Atapupu to Atambua. This move permanently transformed Atambua into the political heart of Belu, a role it continues to hold today. Yet beneath these administrative reforms, the spirit of Belu endured. Customary ceremonies continued. Traditional leaders remained deeply respected within their communities. Families preserved their oral histories, and Mount Lakaan still stood silently over the land, reminding every generation that long before colonial governments drew borders on maps, Belu already possessed a history, an identity, and a soul that no foreign power could erase. But an even greater upheaval was approaching. The Second World War was about to reach the shores of Timor. The arrival of Imperial Japan would bring fear, forced labor, suffering, and profound change to the lives of the people of Belu, marking one of the darkest chapters in the region's long and resilient history.